Chapter 10, Descent to the Abyss. The Cybertan submersible was a marvel of biomechanical engineering, its hull shifting and adapting to pressure changes like the skin of some deep-sea creature. John watched through its transparent sections as they descended through the layers of Kepler-Zendara's vast ocean, leaving the last traces of sunlight far above. The Skeltar cities exist at depths that would crush conventional vessels, ZYX explained, his form now adapted for the aquatic environment with gills visible along his neck and webbed appendages. Their mastery of pressure dynamics exceeds even our own understanding. The ocean life of this alien world was unlike anything from Earth's seas. Bioluminescent creatures the size of whales drifted through the water columns like living galaxies, their bodies pulsing with complex light patterns that ZYX identified as a form of communication. Smaller predators with crystalline teeth and metallic scales hunted in coordinated schools, their movements creating aurora-like displays in the dark water. As they descended past the 10-kilometer mark, John's instruments began detecting artificial structures. The first Skeltar outposts appeared as geometric growths on the seafloor, their surfaces covered in what looked like cultivated coral but gleamed with internal circuitry. "We are being scanned," ZYX announced, his body's patterns shifting to display what John assumed were identification codes. The Skeltar defensive systems are far more sophisticated than surface dwellers realize. Any unauthorized vessel would have been destroyed kilometers ago. The scanning beams felt like gentle pressure against John's mind, not the overwhelming telepathic assault of the Cybertan Council, but a subtle probing that seemed to catalog his thoughts and intentions without actually reading them. It was deeply unsettling. A escort of Skeltar vessels rose from the abyssal plains to surround them. John's first glimpse of the aquatic species left him speechless. They were utterly alien, yet possessed a haunting beauty that reminded him of the deep-sea creatures from Earth's most remote trenches. Their bodies were elongated and sinuous, covered in scales that shifted through the entire visible spectrum. Multiple sets of limbs served different functions, some for swimming, others clearly designed for fine manipulation, and still others that seemed to exist purely for communication through gesture and bioluminescent display. Their heads were crowned with flowing appendages that moved like underwater plants but clearly served as sophisticated sensory organs. The Skeltar city of Abyssos stretched across the ocean floor for dozens of kilometers, its spires reaching up into the dark water like fingers grasping for light they would never touch. The architecture was completely organic, grown rather than built, with every structure pulsing gently as if alive. The Skeltar are perhaps the oldest species on Kepler-Zendara, ZYX explained as their submersible was guided toward a docking facility that dilated to accept them. "They were already ancient when my people first achieved consciousness. Their understanding of biological systems exceeds anything the galaxy has ever seen." John found himself in an air-filled chamber. Apparently the Skeltar maintained areas suitable for surface dwellers, though the atmosphere was thick with moisture and carried scents of brine and unknown chemicals. The delegation that met them moved with fluid grace, their scales shimmering in patterns too complex for human eyes to fully process. Their leader, though John wasn't certain such hierarchical concepts applied to Skeltar society, introduced itself through a combination of sound, gesture, and bioluminescent display that their translation systems rendered as current flows through deep wisdom. "We know of your arrival," Void touched one, the being communicated, its voice like water flowing over stone. "The quantum disturbances of your passage rippled through space-time itself. We have been curious about your purposes." John launched into his prepared explanation about the Thornbeast convergence and the proposed joint operation, but current flows through deep wisdom interrupted him with a gesture that somehow conveyed both amusement and impatience. "Surface politics are of little concern to those who dwell in the deep places," the Skeltar replied. "But we are aware of the growing threat to the crystal core sites. The creatures that spawn in the southern convergence zones affect our harvesting operations as well." "Then you'll consider joining the cooperative effort?" John asked hopefully. "Consider, yes. But our participation would require accommodations. The Firebloods and Metal Minds think in terms of direct confrontation. We prefer subtlety, biological warfare, the long view that spans generations rather than seasons." John sensed complexity in the Skeltar position that would require careful navigation. What specific accommodations would you need? Current flows through Deep Wisdom's patterns shifted to what John interpreted as contemplation. The thorn beasts are not merely aggressive fauna. They are symptoms of a deeper ecological imbalance caused by overharvesting of the crystal cores. Eliminating the creatures without addressing the root cause merely delays the inevitable collapse. You're saying the three species are destroying their own planet? In simple terms, yes. The crystal cores are not just power sources, they are integral to Kepler's and Dara's geological stability. Remove too many, and the gravitational effects of our binary star system will tear the world apart within a few centuries. The implications hit John like a physical blow. He wasn't just trying to broker peace between warring species, he was trying to prevent planetary annihilation. The stakes of his diplomatic mission had just become impossibly higher. What would you propose as an alternative? He asked. Integration rather than exploitation, Current Flows Through Deep Wisdom replied. The cores can be cultivated, grown like living things, rather than simply mined. But such techniques require cooperation between all three species' scientific communities. And more importantly, they require trust that has not existed for millennia. John realized that his joint operation against the thorn beasts might be more crucial than he had imagined, not just as a diplomatic exercise, but as the first step towards saving an entire world from destruction. Chapter 11, The Convergence Threat. The planning session took place in a neutral zone, a floating platform anchored above one of Kepler's and Dara's smaller seas, equipped with environmental systems suitable for all three species. John watched in fascination as representatives from three utterly different civilizations attempted to coordinate a joint military operation. War Chieftain Krax dominated one section of the platform, his volcanic armor steaming in the cooler air, surrounded by his tactical advisors who projected holographic battle plans with aggressive enthusiasm. The Vorthack approach was predictably direct, overwhelming force applied at the creature's breeding grounds. The Cybertan delegation, led by ZYX and several tactical specialists, occupied another area where flowing displays of quantum calculations showed creature movement patterns analyzed down to the probability clouds of individual behaviors. Their approach emphasized precision strikes and coordinated technological suppression. The Skeltar contingent had created their own aquatic environment within the platform, visible through transparent barriers as they communicated through rapid bioluminescent displays. Current Flows Through Deep Wisdom had explained that their strategy focused on biological warfare, introducing engineered pathogens that would disrupt the creature's aggressive behaviors rather than simply killing them. The fundamental problem, John addressed the assembled delegates, is that you're all thinking about this differently. The Vorthack want to kill everything that moves. The Cybertans want to calculate it to death. The Skeltar want to reprogram it biologically. What if we combined all three approaches? Krax's laugh boomed across the platform. The Void Spawn thinks to teach warfare to those who have practiced it for millennia? Amusing. I'm not teaching warfare, John replied calmly. I'm suggesting coordination. On Earth, we learned that the most effective military operations combine multiple tactical approaches simultaneously. He activated a holographic display showing his analysis of the Thorn Beast Convergence Zone. The creatures aren't just random predators. They're following specific behavioral patterns tied to the crystal core energy emissions. Disrupt those patterns at multiple points simultaneously, and you can redirect their entire migration without massive casualties. Sub-Chieftain Thyra leaned forward, her cybernetic implants glowing as she processed the tactical data. Explain this redirection concept. John highlighted key points on the display. The thorn beasts are drawn to high-energy areas, but they're also territorial. Create alternative energy sources in uninhabited regions, and they'll follow those instead of threatening your settlements. The Vorthack can provide the raw energy, the Cybertans can focus and direct it precisely, and the Skeltar can use biological attractants to ensure the creatures respond appropriately. Current Flows Through Deep Wisdom's patterns shifted through what John had learned to recognize as intense interest. This approach preserves the creature's ecological function while protecting our territories. It aligns with our preference for systemic solutions rather than symptomatic treatments. But it requires perfect timing, ZYX added, his analytical mind immediately grasping the logistical challenges. Any delay or miscommunication could result in the creatures scattering in all directions, making the problem worse instead of better. John nodded. That's why we need integrated command and control. Representatives from all three species working together in real time, sharing information and coordinating responses. The platform fell silent as the implications sank in. What John was proposing wasn't just a joint military operation, it was the first truly integrated command structure in Kepler-Zendara's recorded history. Who would command such an operation? Krax demanded. Vortak will not take orders from Metal Bloods or Fish Spawn, and I suspect the feeling is mutual. I will, John said simply. I'm the only one here who doesn't have centuries of grudges clouding my judgment. And I'm the one who'll be held responsible if this fails. The debate that followed was intense, conducted in 3 different languages with translation delays that sometimes led to near violence. But gradually, a consensus emerged. The joint operation would proceed under John's overall command, with species specialists maintaining control over their own forces while coordinating through a shared tactical network. As the delegates finalized the operational parameters, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were being observed. His astronaut training had developed his situational awareness to a high degree, and something about the empty ocean around their platform felt wrong. There were no visible threats, but his instincts insisted that hostile eyes were watching their preparations. ZYX, he said quietly during a break in negotiations, are your sensors detecting anything unusual in the surrounding area? ZYX's patterns shifted to active scanning mode, his body becoming a living sensor array. After a moment, his coloration turned to what John had learned indicated concern. Quantum disturbances beneath the platform. Something is masking its presence using technology one don't recognize. We may not be as alone as we believed. John's blood ran cold. The mysterious fourth party that had been manipulating events was apparently taking a more direct interest in their activities. The question was whether they would act to sabotage the joint operation, and if so, what form that sabotage might take. As the planning session resumed, John found himself preparing for 2 battles simultaneously, one against the Thornbeast Convergence, and another against enemies whose capabilities and intentions remained completely unknown. Chapter 12, Sabotage in the Depths. The attack came without warning during the night cycle, when most of the platform's occupants were resting in their species-appropriate environments. John was awakened by emergency alarms that screamed across all audio frequencies simultaneously, Vortak battle roars, Cybertan harmonic warnings, and Skeltar subsonic distress calls. He rushed to the command center to find chaos. The platform's defensive systems were failing one by one, not from external attack but from internal sabotage. Someone or something had introduced a viral program into the shared networks that was systematically destroying the integration protocols they had spent days developing. Status report. John shouted over the cacophony of alarms. Unknown infiltrators have compromised our primary systems, ZYX replied, his body blazing with emergency patterns as he interfaced directly with the platform's quantum processors. The viral code is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to adapt and evolve in real time, countering our defensive measures as fast as we implement them. War Chieftain Krax appeared in the command center, his volcanic armor fully activated and crackling with defensive energy fields. Treachery. One of the other species has betrayed our alliance before it could even begin. No, current flows through Deep Wisdom interjected, its bioluminescent patterns flickering with rapid data streams. Analysis of the viral code indicates origin from none of our 3 civilizations. This is the work of the shadow manipulators we have long suspected but never confirmed. John's tactical training kicked in as he assessed the situation. The platform was losing structural integrity as key systems failed, and the 3 species representatives were already beginning to eye each other with suspicion. If he didn't act fast, the alliance would collapse into mutual recrimination and violence. Everyone shut up and listen, he commanded with the authority of someone who had commanded space missions under emergency conditions. We're under attack by a fourth party that wants us to blame each other. Don't give them what they want. ZYX, can you isolate the viral infiltration points? Working on it, ZYX replied, his form shifting into configurations John had never seen before as he became a living firewall against the digital assault. The intrusion appears to be coming from below us. Something in the deep ocean is broadcasting the viral code directly into our systems. John turned to current flows through deep wisdom. Can your people's deep sea capabilities reach whatever's down there? Possibly, but it would be extremely dangerous. The viral code is being transmitted on quantum frequencies that could interfere with our biological systems. Any Skeltar who attempts to approach the source might be compromised. What about a combined approach? John suggested, his mind racing through possibilities. Vorthack energy shields to protect against the quantum interference, Cybertan navigation and analysis to locate the exact source, and Skeltar deep-sea mobility to actually reach the target? Krax's eyes blazed with the prospect of direct action. You propose to take the fight to these shadow skulkers? Good. Vorthack warriors grow tired of defensive postures. But we must move quickly, ZYX warned, his patterns flickering as he fought the ongoing digital assault. The viral code is learning our countermeasures. I estimate 12 minutes before complete system failure. John felt the familiar calm that came over him during crisis situations. Then we do this fast and dirty. Krax, I need your best energy shield specialists. Current flows, your fastest deep-sea vehicle. ZYX, portable quantum analysis equipment. We're going hunting. The descent into the abyss was unlike anything John had experienced, even in his astronaut career. The combined Skeltar Cybertan Vorthack vessel was a hybrid nightmare of competing technologies that somehow worked in concert, protected by energy fields that turned the surrounding water into a cocoon of superheated plasma. At a depth of 15 kilometers, they found their target, a massive artificial structure that definitely wasn't built by any of the 3 known species. It resembled a fusion of organic growth and mechanical precision, with surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. John's sensors couldn't get consistent readings on its composition or energy signature. By the sacred flames, Krax breathed, what manner of abomination is this? Unknown technology, ZYX reported, his analysis systems working at maximum capacity. The quantum signatures are unlike anything in our databases. The builders of this facility possess capabilities that exceed all 3 of our civilizations. Current flows through deep wisdom's patterns shifted to what John had learned indicated extreme concern. The structure is not merely artificial, it is actively hostile to biological systems. Our scouts report that marine life for kilometers around has been altered, converted into something that serves the facility's purposes. John made a command decision that he hoped wouldn't get them all killed. We're going in. Whatever's in there has been manipulating all 3 of your species for who knows how long. It's time to find out who's really behind the conflicts on this world. As their vessel approached the alien facility's entrance, a sphincter-like opening that dilated to admit them, John couldn't shake the feeling that they were swimming directly into the jaws of something far more dangerous than anything they had faced before. Chapter 13, The Puppet Masters Revealed. The interior of the alien facility defied every law of physics John knew. Corridors twisted through impossible geometries, with gravity shifting directions seemingly at random. Water coexisted with breathable atmosphere in the same spaces, separated not by barriers but by some kind of selective field effect that allowed each species to exist comfortably. The architecture is designed for our specific physiologies, ZYX observed, his quantum sensors working overtime to map their surroundings. Whoever built this has been observing our species for a very long time. They moved deeper into the structure, following energy readings that led toward what appeared to be the facility's central core. Along the way, they encountered evidence of the mysterious builder's activities, vast databases containing detailed biological and psychological profiles of all 3 species, manipulation scenarios dating back centuries, and most disturbing of all, breeding programs designed to enhance conflict-oriented traits in each population. They've been playing us like game pieces, Krax growled, his volcanic armor flaring with rage as he reviewed the Vorthack manipulation files. Every major war, every territorial dispute, every resource conflict, all guided by these shadow manipulators. Current flows through deep wisdom's patterns cycled through colors John had never seen before, indicating emotions that human language couldn't adequately express. The ecological damage to our world, even that was intentional. They have been harvesting the quantum energy released by our conflicts, feeding on the chaos and destruction we inflict upon each other. The central chamber, when they finally reached it, contained horrors that would haunt John's dreams for the rest of his life. Suspended in fluid-filled tanks were members of all three species, but they had been altered, their bodies integrated with technology that pulsed with malevolent purpose. These were not prisoners, they were components in some vast biological computer system. At the chamber's center stood the puppet masters themselves. John's first impression was of spiders, but that comparison fell woefully short of capturing their true alienness. They were beings of pure energy given semi-physical form, their bodies shifting between matter and electromagnetic radiation at will. When they spoke, it was directly into the minds of their audience, their thoughts carrying undertones of ancient malice and contempt. So, the game pieces develop unexpected initiative, the largest of them communicated, its mental voice dripping with amusement. How refreshing. We had grown bored with the predictability of your conflicts. Who are you? John demanded, fighting against the psychic pressure that threatened to drive him to his knees. What do you want with this world? We are the ethereals, shepherds of chaos, gardeners of conflict. We seed worlds with strife and harvest the quantum energies that result. Your little planet has been particularly productive, three species locked in eternal struggle, generating vast amounts of temporal-spatial distortion that we convert to pure power. ZYX's patterns blazed with rage as he processed the implications. You're parasites. You've been feeding on our civilization's pain and destruction for millennia. Parasites? The ethereal's mental laugh was like broken glass scraping against John's consciousness. We prefer to think of ourselves as farmers. And you have been such productive livestock. Krax stepped forward, his weapons charging with volcanic fury. Then prepare to lose your livestock, shadow scum. The Vorthack will burn this place to ash and cinder. Will you? Another ethereal drifted closer, its form crackling with barely contained energy. Even now, our manipulations continue. The Thornbeast Convergence was our creation, designed to force the three species into cooperation just long enough for us to study their integrated capabilities. Your little alliance was always part of our plan. John felt a chill that had nothing to do with the facility's environment. You wanted us to work together? Of course. Individual species conflicts grow stale after a few centuries. But the potential energy released when unlikely allies are forced to betray each other, that is a delicacy we have been anticipating for some time. Current flows through deep wisdom's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what John now recognized as tactical calculation. They intend to use our cooperation against us. The joint operation against the Thorn Beasts, it's a trap. How perceptive. Yes, your combined forces will be allowed to succeed initially, building trust and interdependence. Then, at the crucial moment, we will trigger betrayals that will shatter not just the alliance but the psychological foundations of all three civilizations. The resulting chaos will power our operations for millennia to come. John's mind raced, looking for options. The ethereals were clearly more powerful than anything the three species could field individually, and they had been manipulating events for so long that almost any action might play into their hands. But there was one factor they hadn't accounted for. You made one mistake, he said, stepping forward despite the psychic pressure that felt like standing in a hurricane. You brought me here. I'm not part of your equations. I'm a variable you can't control. The largest ethereal's form solidified slightly, focusing its attention entirely on John. The void touched human. Yes, you have been an interesting anomaly. But ultimately, you are still bound by the same physical laws as the others. What can one primitive alien accomplish against beings who have manipulated civilizations since before your species crawled from the mud? John smiled grimly, his hand moving to the emergency beacon on his belt, not the standard distress signal, but something he had rigged during their descent into the facility. Maybe nothing. But I can certainly try to ruin your day. He activated the beacon, sending a signal that he desperately hoped would reach its intended target in time. Because if his desperate gamble failed, not only would the Alliance be destroyed, but 3 entire civilizations would be condemned to eternal manipulation by beings that fed on their suffering. Chapter 14, The Quantum Gambit. The beacon signal propagated through subspace at faster-than-light speeds, carrying John's desperate message to every quantum communication array on Kepler's Andara. He had programmed it during their descent using a combination of Cyber-Tan quantum encryption, Vortac energy amplification, and Skeltar bioharmonic resonance, a hybrid signal that no single species could have created alone. The message was simple: the coordinates of the ethereal facility and a complete data dump of everything they had discovered about the Puppet Master's manipulation of planetary conflicts. The ethereals reacted with surprise and rage, their energy forms blazing with malevolent power. Clever, but ultimately futile. Even if your species' military forces locate this facility, they cannot penetrate our defenses. We have had millennia to prepare. Maybe, John replied, backing toward his companions as the chamber's atmosphere grew thick with hostile energy. But you've been planning for conflicts between separate species. You haven't prepared for what happens when they truly unite. The facility shuddered as the first wave of attackers arrived, not the separate military forces of 3 species, but an integrated assault that combined their technologies in ways the ethereals had never encountered. Vortac thermal lances focused by Cyber-Tan quantum lenses and guided by Skeltar bionavigation systems carved through defenses that had been designed to repel conventional attacks. Impossible, the lead ethereal snarled, its form flickering as systems throughout the facility began failing. The species of this world cannot cooperate on such a scale. Our psychological profiles are comprehensive. Your profiles are 300 years out of date, ZYX interrupted, his patterns blazing with triumph as he interfaced with the facility's failing systems. You've been so busy manipulating surface conflicts that you missed the underground cooperation networks that developed in response to your manipulations. Current flows through Deep Wisdom's bioluminescence pulsed with what John had learned to recognize as satisfaction. The deep-sea settlements, the high-altitude mining operations, the quantum research stations, all have been secretly sharing information and resources for decades. Your very attempts to divide us forced us to find ways to work together. Krax's laughter boomed through the chamber as Vortac assault teams breached the facility's outer defenses. Did you truly believe that warriors of 3 worlds would fail to recognize a common enemy once it revealed itself? Your arrogance blinds you to the very nature of those you seek to manipulate. The ethereals were adapting rapidly, their energy forms coalescing into more solid configurations as they prepared for direct combat. But they had made a crucial error: they had become dependent on the very quantum energies they harvested from conflict, and the sudden cooperation between the 3 species had disrupted their power base. You may have won this encounter, the lead ethereal conceded as explosions rocked the facility, but you cannot maintain such cooperation indefinitely. The fundamental differences between your species will reassert themselves, and when they do, we will be waiting. Will you? John asked, activating the final component of his plan. During their exploration of the facility, he had identified the quantum resonance frequencies that the ethereals used to maintain their energy forms. Now, using the combined technological capabilities of all 3 species, he began broadcasting a counter-frequency that would disrupt their very existence. The effect was immediate and devastating. The ethereals' forms began to destabilize, their energy matrices unraveling as the harmonic interference destroyed their quantum coherence. They had enough time for one final message before their dissolution. This changes nothing. There are others of our kind, scattered throughout the galaxy. They will learn of our failure and take steps to ensure it is not repeated. Your cooperation is temporary, our influence is eternal. As the facility collapsed around them, John and his companions fought their way to the extraction point where rescue vessels from all 3 species waited. The immediate threat was over, but the ethereal's final words haunted John's thoughts. This victory was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. Chapter 15, Aftermath and Revelations. The joint debriefing session took place in the ruins of the ethereal facility, now exposed to the ocean surface as emergency pumping systems cleared the flooded chambers. Representatives from all three species worked side by side, documenting the evidence of centuries of manipulation while their respective governments processed the implications. John stood at the edge of the facility's central crater, watching salvage teams recover the biological computers that had once held members of all three species. The rescued individuals were alive but deeply traumatized, their memories fragmented by whatever the ethereals had done to them. Rehabilitation would take years, if it was possible at all. The psychological impact will be significant, current flows through deep wisdom observed, its patterns subdued as it processed data streams from the facility's quantum databases. Many of our people will struggle to accept that their most deeply held grievances were artificially induced. ZYX nodded, his own coloration dimmed by the weight of revelation. Centuries of warfare, millions of deaths, entire generations raised in hatred, all orchestrated by beings who saw us as nothing more than entertainment. Krax's response was more direct. Then we honor our dead by ensuring their sacrifice leads to something better. The shadow manipulators may return, but they will find a united world waiting for them. The war chieftain's words carried more weight than John had expected. In the days following the facility's destruction, something remarkable had happened. Instead of returning to their old patterns of conflict, the three species had begun to address their genuine differences through negotiation rather than warfare. It wasn't perfect. Centuries of mistrust couldn't be erased overnight, and there were still incidents where old prejudices flared into violence. But for the first time in recorded history, there were actual peace talks between the three governments, mediated by joint councils that included representatives from all species. The resource allocation protocols are particularly promising, ZYX reported during one of their planning sessions. By sharing crystal core harvesting techniques, we can meet all three species' energy needs while maintaining planetary stability. John had been instrumental in developing those protocols, drawing on his outsider's perspective to find solutions that none of the species had considered. The key was recognizing that the crystal cores weren't just power sources, they were integral components of the planet's quantum structure, and could be cultivated rather than simply mined. Speaking of planetary stability, current flows through deep wisdom interjected, our analysis of the ethereal data has revealed something significant about your arrival, John Human. John looked up from the tactical displays he had been studying. What do you mean? The portal that brought you to our world, it was not randomly generated. The ethereals created it as part of their manipulation strategy. They intended to introduce a destabilizing element that would accelerate conflicts between our species. The implications hit John like a physical blow. They wanted me here? Yes, but not for the reasons they anticipated. Their psychological profiles suggested that a primitive outsider would increase tensions through cultural misunderstandings and resource competition. They failed to account for your diplomatic training and natural problem-solving abilities. Krax's laugh boomed across the chamber. So even their failures serve our purposes. The void spawn was meant to divide us but instead showed us how to unite. Truly, the spirits of war have a sense of humor. John felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. If the ethereals had created the portal that brought him to Kepler Zendara, then they might also possess the technology to send him home. But that would mean abandoning the world and the people he had come to care about, just when his efforts were beginning to bear fruit. There is more, current flows through deep wisdom continued. The ethereal databases contain detailed records of portal technology. With time and resources, we might be able to recreate the conditions that brought you here, but in reverse. You could send me home? John asked, his voice carefully neutral. Possibly. But such an attempt would be extremely dangerous, and success is far from guaranteed. The quantum energies involved could as easily tear you apart as transport you safely. John looked around at the representatives of three species who had become his friends and allies over the past months. ZYX, whose analytical mind had become invaluable in developing integration protocols. Krax, whose warrior's honor had proven stronger than centuries of programmed hatred. Current flows through deep wisdom, whose ancient perspective had provided context for understanding the true scope of the ethereal threat. Earth seemed impossibly distant now, not just in space but in relevance. Whatever life he had left behind there belonged to a different person, someone who had never faced down energy beings that fed on conflict, never helped broker peace between alien civilizations, never stood at the center of events that would determine the fate of an entire world. "We have time to consider such possibilities," ZYX said diplomatically. "The portal technology is complex and will require extensive research before any attempt could be made." John nodded, grateful for the reprieve. He wasn't ready to make that choice yet, between the familiar world of his birth and the alien world that had become his home. But he suspected that when the time came, the decision might be easier than he expected. Chapter 16: The Price of Peace. 6 months after the destruction of the ethereal facility, John stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, the first truly integrated research facility built by all three species working in harmony. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see the fruits of their cooperation: Cybertan quantum arrays powered by Vortac thermal generators, protected by Skeltar bioadaptive hulls that could withstand the harsh conditions near the binary stars. The station served multiple purposes: scientific research, diplomatic meetings, and most importantly, development of the portal technology that might someday allow John to return to Earth. But peace, John had learned, came with its own costs. The integration process had created new challenges that none of the three species had anticipated. Cultural misunderstandings led to minor conflicts almost daily. Economic systems designed for centuries of warfare struggled to adapt to cooperative trade. And most troubling of all, there were groups within each species that actively opposed the new alliance. "The purist movements grow stronger," ZYX reported during their weekly briefing, his patterns dim with concern. "They claim that cooperation with other species dilutes the essential nature of Cybertan consciousness." Krax's response was characteristically blunt. Vortac isolationists speak similarly. They believe that working with weak species makes us soft, vulnerable to future threats. Some have already returned to the old ways, raiding settlements and taking what they need by force. Current flows through Deep Wisdom's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with what John had learned indicated deep worry. "The depths walkers among my people retreat ever deeper into the ocean trenches, claiming that surface politics corrupt the purity of deep water existence. They speak of severing all ties with land dwellers." John studied the reports with growing unease. The purist movements weren't large, but they were growing, fed by the same fundamental differences between species that had originally led to conflict. Even worse, intelligence suggested that some groups were actively working to sabotage cooperative projects. "It's not unexpected," John said finally. "On Earth, major social changes always create reactionary movements. The question is whether we can contain the damage while the majority of your people adapt to the new reality." "Containment may not be possible much longer," ZYX warned. 3 days ago, purist saboteurs destroyed a joint mining operation in the southern crystal core fields. 17 beings died, 5 Cybertans, 7 Vortac, and 5 Skeltar. The perpetrators left messages claiming that species mixing is an abomination against nature. The attack had shaken John more than he cared to admit. For months, he had watched the three species slowly learn to work together, overcoming centuries of mistrust through shared goals and mutual benefit. To see that progress threatened by extremists who preferred the old ways of conflict was deeply frustrating. "We need to address this directly," John decided. "Not just the security threats, but the underlying fears that drive people to join these movements." "How do you propose to do that?" Krax asked. "Fear of the other is older than civilization itself." John had been thinking about this problem for weeks, drawing on his knowledge of human history and the patterns he had observed on Kepler's Zendara. Education and exposure. The purist movements thrive in isolation, where they can maintain their prejudices without challenge. But direct contact between species, especially in non-threatening environments, breaks down those barriers. "You suggest cultural exchange programs?" Current flows through Deep Wisdom inquired, its patterns shifting to indicate interest. "More than that. Joint communities where members of all three species live and work together on a daily basis. Shared schools where children learn alongside peers from other species. Mixed crews on exploration and research missions. Make cooperation so normal that extremism becomes the aberration. ZYX's analytical mind immediately grasped the implications. Such integration would require massive social reorganization. Many individuals would resist participation, viewing it as forced assimilation. That's why it has to be voluntary, John explained. We don't force anyone to participate, but we make the benefits of participation so attractive that most people choose to join. Better living conditions, access to advanced technology, opportunities for personal growth that don't exist in monospecies societies. Krax leaned back in his chair, which adjusted automatically to accommodate his massive frame. You speak of reshaping entire civilizations, Void Spawn. Such changes take generations to implement. Do we have generations? John asked pointedly. The Ethereals warn that others of their kind exist. If they return to find us still divided, still vulnerable to manipulation, they'll pick up where their predecessors left off. The grim reality of that threat hung over everything they did. The Ethereals might be gone, but their influence persisted in the deep-seated suspicions and prejudices that centuries of manipulation had created. Only by fundamentally changing the nature of interspecies relations could they hope to resist future attempts at manipulation. There is another consideration, current flows through deep wisdom added quietly. The portal research is nearing completion. Within a few months, we may be able to attempt sending you home to Earth. If you leave now, who will continue to mediate between our species? John felt the weight of that question like a physical burden. He had become more than just a diplomat, he was a living symbol of successful cooperation between different peoples. His departure might signal to extremists that the alliance was temporary, encouraging them to wait for a return to the old ways. But staying meant abandoning any hope of returning to Earth, of seeing his own people again, of living among those who shared his basic humanity. It meant committing the rest of his life to a world that would always be alien to him, no matter how much he came to care for its inhabitants. Let's focus on making the integration programs work, John said, postponing the decision he wasn't ready to make. If we can prove that cooperation creates a better life for everyone, the extremist movements will lose their appeal. As they began planning the first experimental integrated communities, John couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The purist movements were growing bolder, the portal technology was advancing rapidly, and somewhere in the vastness of space, other Ethereals might already be planning their return to reclaim their lost harvest.